This next lesson is midpoint and distance, which you have learned already in algebra, so this is kind of review. So we're going to work on finding the midpoint between coordinate points and the distance of a line in a coordinate plane. So this is a midpoint formula. This is very important to write down. When you're dealing with the midpoint or distance, the first thing you should always do is label your points x1, y1. A lot of people tend to look at this and think this would be like x to the first power, y to the first power, or x squared, y squared. These circled variables are different from this. These mean two different things. With the circles, that's just saying that's how we represent a number. That's just another way of representing y2. This is saying y squared, so those are different. Make sure that you always put the 2 below or the 1 below. So like I said before, when you're first solving these problems, you want to first label your points x1, y1, x2, y2. So this would be my x1, y1. This would be x2, y2. And it doesn't matter the order that you have them, you're still going to get the same answer, even if I labeled -2, -2 as x1, y1. So my formula is, in parentheses, x1, which is 4, plus x2 divided by 2, comma, y1 plus y2 divided by 2. And then you should always simplify that. So 4 plus -2, that's going to give me 2. And 2 divided by 2 is going to give me 1. 2 plus -2 is going to give me 0. 0 divided by 2 is going to give me 0. So that would be the midpoint. Right now, you should pause the video and try to find the midpoint of these two problems. Remember first to label your points x1, y1, and x2, y2. So my other two midpoints would be 3, -4, and 5/2, -2. Again, first I labeled my points x1, y1, and x2, y2. Once I did that, then I plugged in my formula. So really what you're doing is finding the average of the x's and the average of the y's to find the middle. So again, this would be the middle of my first 2 points, and this would be the middle of my second. Now in this problem, it gives me the midpoint, but it wants me to find the other endpoint. So what you could do is set up two separate equations. I'm still going to label my points. However, the midpoint, I'm going to label xm for midpoint and ym for midpoint. Then the endpoints given, I'm going to label x1 and y1. So my two separate equations will be the two different x's and y's. In my equation, we have x1 plus x2 divided by 2 is equal to my xm. So if I substitute what I know, I would have -3 plus x2, I'm not sure what that x is yet, divided by 2 is equal to 2. And I'm going to solve. So the first thing I'm going to do is this would have to be done first. So I want to get rid of this divide by 2. So the opposite of dividing something would be multiplying. So if I multiply this side by 2 to cancel out these 2's, I have to multiply the other side by 2. So now I have -3 plus x2 is equal to 4. And now I have to get rid of that -3, so I have to add 3 to both sides. And x2 is equal to 7. So I will write that up in the right-hand corner. Right now you should pause the video and try to find y2 all by yourself through the same process. So now I set up my equation, and it's the same process like I said. I first want to get rid of this divide by 2 here, so I'm going to multiply this side by 2. Whatever I do to one side, I always have to do to the other side. So this would be -2 is equal to -5 plus y2. So since this is a minus 5, I have to add 5 to both sides, and I would get a positive 3. So my other endpoint would be 7, comma 3. So now we're going to be working with the distance formula. And it's the same process, except we just plug in into a different formula. As you can see, here I have x2 first and y2 first. If you put x1 and y1 first, you're still going to get the same answer. So now we want to try to solve and practice. So again, you first label x1, y1, x2, y2, and you plug in your numbers. So the distance formula is the square root of x2, which is 4, 4 minus my x1, which is negative 7, squared, plus y2, which is negative 3, minus y1, which is 5, squared. Now, something that a lot of people tend to screw up is this should always be a subtraction sign, even if this is a negative number. But when you have subtract a negative, that changes to a plus plus. It changes to the opposite. So now if I solve this, I would have 4 plus 7, which is equal to 11 squared. So that's 121 plus negative 3 minus 5 is negative 8. That squared is 64. When you add those together, you get the square root of 185. If you put that into your calculator, that is roughly 13.6. You should pause the video and attempt to find the distance of the next two problems. So if you look at my work, the first thing I did, or I actually didn't show my work, was this was my x1, y1, x2, y2. And then I plug in my answers in my formula. And this is what I got. Once you simplify it, I had 25 plus 225, which is 250, or 15.8. The last one, I chose negative 30 to be my x1, y1, and my x2, y2. Plug in my formula, and I get square root of 1,125, or roughly 33.5. So that is it for today. Fill out the Google form and submit your answers. Have a wonderful evening.